Before we get into today's show, some Bengals news has come across the wire. The Bengals are exercising the fifth-year option on defensive back Dax Hill. Now, obviously, Hill is a former first-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals, so these next 2 years are going to be guaranteed for Dax Hill. He's going to make over $12 million on that fifth-year option. I do want to be very clear here. I think this is the right move for Cincinnati. Obviously, he's coming off a very significant injury this past season, but I think the Bengals view him as their top young defensive back, and I think last year he really was on a path to playing some really good football for Cincinnati before he got hurt. So Dax Hill going to be around for the long term for Cincinnati. The Bengals picking up his fifth-year option. Welcome into Bengals Breakdown. I am your host, Stone Shields, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be breaking down an article from Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic. He basically broke down 5 Cincinnati Bengals that were the most impacted by what Cincinnati did in the NFL Draft. That article from Paul Dehner Jr. is up on The Athletic. Really encourage you guys to check that out. Give him a follow over on Twitter as well, at Paul Dehner Jr. Does a fantastic job breaking down everything you need to know about the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to be breaking down this particular piece today on today's show and my thoughts and opinions on that as well. Before we get into that, make sure you guys give me a follow over on Twitter at StoneShields_. All of our Bengals Breakdown content will be posted to my Twitter page. Also, any updates from any beat reporters about anything going on with the Cincinnati Bengals, you will find that on my page as well. So give me a follow over on Twitter. Would greatly appreciate it. All right, top 5 players impacted by the NFL Draft broken down by Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic. This first guy shouldn't surprise anybody, right? Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals star pass rusher, certainly impacted by what Cincinnati did in the first round. Here's what Paul Dehner Jr. had to write, saying this in his article. It's much easier today for the Bengals to stand their ground on their offer or let Hendrickson play out the final year of his deal. Any time missed in camp or early in the season would merely mean more reps for 2 young starting edges who can use every single developmental snap they can get. Now, I do want to be very clear here. Even if Trey Hendrickson was extended by the Cincinnati Bengals, they would have still looked at an edge rusher in this draft, right? That was a need regardless of this Trey Hendrickson situation. But now there really is truly a plan in place for the Bengals. They have a guy that they're bringing in Shemar Stewart, who, by the way, as we kind of distance ourselves from this 2025 NFL Draft, I think all of us as a fan base should begin to get even more excited about Shemar Stewart. Obviously, there were some concerns there the night of the draft when the Bengals took him because all the guys that were available, much safer picks. But this could really turn into a phenomenal pick for Cincinnati. I think we all as a fan base should really get behind him. More reps for Shemar Stewart is fantastic, right? That's the knock on him, right, that the production wasn't there. Well, how are you going to get your production to a level in which it needs to be? You're going to need a lot of work, and Shemar Stewart's certainly going to get a lot of work, because I would be shocked if Trey Hendrickson showed up for training camp. Now, the past couple of years with the Cincinnati Bengals football team, really ever since they've been good, there's always some type of distraction kind of floating around August and September, right? Obviously, last year it was the Jamar Chase situation. You've had drama with Trey Hendrickson in the past. You've had several injuries with Joe Burrow in the past as well, the appendectomy from Joe Burrow as well. So it's always something. Make no mistake, and Dehner points this out in his article, August and September, the distraction is going to be Trey Hendrickson. I think my thoughts on this whole situation kind of have changed a little bit, to be completely honest with you, ever since he went on the Pat McAfee show and kind of aired out the dirty laundry in front of the whole world. Doesn't necessarily feel like Cincinnati's in a position where they're going to give him a long-term contract at this point. We'll see. Could be wrong. But do want to make note, the idea of trading him, the Bengals were never going to trade him anyway, as we've said many times on this show. But a lot of people nationally kind of were throwing around that idea. Well, that's definitely not going to happen, because the draft has came and went, and Bengals aren't going to get any compensation for Trey Hendrickson that they could use for this 2025 season. So the Bengals are stuck with Trey Hendrickson. The Trey Hendrickson's stuck with the Bengals. We'll see if he has to play out his deal, or if he doesn't show up, if he holds out, or if ultimately the Bengals and Hendrickson reach an agreement. Leads to the pin comment of today's show. Will Hendrickson hold out of games? This is kind of something I've been thinking about. I'm really curious to know what you guys think on this particular matter, right? I would be shocked if he showed up for training camp. I'm expecting him to hold out of that. But would he take this into the season and hold out of football games? Let me know. Type Y for yes or M for no in the comments of today's show. Next guy also pretty obvious on this list, linebacker Germaine Pratt, certainly affected by what Cincinnati did in the NFL draft. I really think this is the clearest impact, right? Out of all the guys that we're going to discuss here on today's show, the Bengals obviously took two linebackers, right? Barrett Carter out of Clemson in round 4 and Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina in round 2. Now, the Bengals thought about, trading a guy like Germaine Pratt, but clearly nobody was interested in trading for Germaine Pratt, and I think it's only a matter of time before Pratt is released. And the Bengals, by the way, are going to save $5.6 million by releasing Germaine Pratt. Dehner points out in his article, it feels like it's kind of inevitable that he's going to end up in Indianapolis with Lou Anarumo. Anarumo obviously has always been very high on Germaine Pratt. And I still think Pratt can play, all right? But the writing was on the wall. His time with Cincinnati ultimately, was coming to an end as this season came to an end. I think the Bengals, the fan base, lots of people, me, myself, were hoping they could at least get a 7th-round pick for Germaine Pratt. That ultimately didn't materialize. Only a matter of time before he gets released, especially after drafting those two linebackers. We'll continue with our list here in a minute, but first, got to give a shout-out to our friends over at Fanatics. Let you guys know that Bengals Draft Hats are still available. The draft obviously is in the rearview mirror, but that doesn't mean you can't get some Cincinnati Bengals swag, courtesy of our friends over at Fanatics. Visit that link right there, chatsports.com/Bengals Draft Hats. We will put that in the comment section and the description of today's show. Next up here is Geno Stone, safety for the Cincinnati Bengals. And as we know, the Bengals did not address this safety position. They didn't address it in free agency. They didn't address it in the draft either. And I believe only one of their UDFAs is actually a safety as well. But Bengals making it very clear they are all in with Geno Stone. It's been well documented here on our channel, and really if anybody pays attention to the Bengals, the struggles of Geno Stone this past season, right? Particularly in coverage. Wasn't there necessarily, but also from a tackling perspective, really had a ton of missed tackles. Got a buddy that always joked that, Lou Anarumo's plan on defense was to send his guys out there just to cover air and not the 11 guys on the football field. Well, Geno Stone certainly was one of those guys that was just out there covering air because he rarely seemed to be at the right place at the right time. But the Bengals, I think, are kind of banking on hoping that, kind of that rebirth, as Dehner alludes to in his article, of Geno Stone that we saw at the end of last year where he kind of came alive a little bit. If you remember the Bengals at the end of last year, they weren't playing elite competition. They certainly weren't playing elite quarterbacks either. He was able to get a couple of interceptions and kind of go from there. But the safety room, it's getting ran back. And we'll see if a guy like Tycen Anderson can challenge Geno Stone and all. It's an idea that we kind of floated around last year, but the Bengals, Lou Anarumo, never really went with Tycen Anderson at that safety spot. He really was obviously their special teams ace, and he's going to continue to be that guy. But it feels like Cincinnati's going to roll out Geno Stone for 95% of their snaps at that safety position, along with probably Jordan Battle, and hopefully under the tutelage of Al Golden and some new coaches on that defensive staff as well, you can start playing better football for this Cincinnati Bengals football team. Now, I believe this was the biggest mistake that Cincinnati made this offseason. Now, I get it. You can't have everything, right? As a team, Bengals checked off a lot of boxes here this offseason, right? T. Higgins, Jamar Chase doesn't really get any bigger than that. They addressed weaknesses in the draft, right? Whether or not you like or hate the draft, what they did in the draft, they addressed some weaknesses. I feel a lot better about the offensive line. You got another running back there as well. You got an edge rusher with high upside potential. But that safety position really kind of got left in the dust, and they're running it back with the same group. So, are you all right running it back with Geno Stone? Let me know what you guys think in the comments section of today's show. Type A for yes or B for no. And I always think this is funny when we're talking about Geno Stone here on Bengals Breakdown because you get a lot of comments that, Stone sucks. And I read those and I think, are they talking about Geno Stone or are they talking about me? I'm never quite too sure. But regardless, let me know what you guys think. This question down in the comments section right now. Two more guys to discuss here on today's show. Cordell Volson, also a guy that was significantly impacted by what Cincinnati did in the NFL draft. Let's take a look at what Dehner had to write for The Athletic, saying, the 2022 4th-round pick out of North Dakota State earned player performance escalators in his contract by virtue of 3 years spent as a starter in Cincinnati, racking up over 2,200 snaps. The increased number on his contract also puts a target on his back in one of the most prominent position battles in training camp. Now, this is really interesting when you're talking about Cordell Volson. I still am holding on to some belief that he's able to still play at a professional level, at a starting guard level, believe it or not. As a run blocker, he can do that, right? But obviously Cincinnati is a pass-first football team. He really struggled in pass pro, but you're bringing in this new coach here with Scott Peters. And I think a lot of us as fans don't always necessarily understand how impactful a coach can be in the NFL. And, he's been listening to Frank Pollock for several years. Now he gets a new voice in there with Scott Peters, who, by the way, when he was talking about Cordell Volson at the NFL Combine, kind of was holding out some hope that, hey, he would be able to help develop him and get him back to where he needs to be and get him in a spot where he can be productive for the Cincinnati Bengals football team. But of note, that he's supposed to get $3.75 million with those escalators that Dehner was referring to. So he could very well be in a situation where Cincinnati says, it's a lot. We're going to cut him and bring him back at a lower deal as a backup. The Bengals have added some new faces to that room. Dylan Fairchild, of course, most notably as your third-round pick for the Cincinnati Bengals out of Georgia. I view him as to be their guy. Once we put out our next Bengals depth chart, I will have Fairchild in there, penciled in at that left guard spot. But that doesn't mean that Cordell can't bump over to that right guard spot or still find his way starting for this Cincinnati Bengals football team. Really interesting going into training camp what the situation is going to look like with Cordell Volson under a new offensive line coach in Scott Peters. Last guy here before we get out of here on today's show is Jermaine Burton, a guy that really ever since his last eviction kind of has floated under the radar. Obviously a tumultuous rookie season for Jermaine Burton, right? You had the 2 evictions, you had the assault accusations, missed practices, missed meetings, healthy scratches, got left at home when the Bengals went on the road trip to Pittsburgh. Just really couldn't have been any worse, to be honest with you, for Jermaine Burton. And Burton is lucky to still be on this team. I think a lot of other NFL teams would have moved on from Jermaine Burton. But when you look at what Cincinnati did, they didn't draft any wide receivers, and they didn't bring in any veterans in free agency. So they are giving him an opportunity to go out there and carve out a role for himself. And, Dehner and the rest of the reporters, they were hanging out, at the team facility during the draft. Reportedly, Burton was there all the days putting in some work. There's been some reports that, hey, T. Higgins, with kind of a new leadership role after his new contract, is trying to kind of bring him along, put him under his wing, and help him out. And, he's been ripped publicly by Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin. And, he's still here trying to make the most of his opportunity. But as I mentioned, Cincinnati didn't add any receivers, a couple of UDFAs, of course. But that kick return position as well is totally wide open. And Jermaine Burton, the talent is there. And I think he will really develop into a quality kick returner in the NFL. It's just a matter of being a professional and doing the right things. But based on what Cincinnati did this offseason, not adding another receiver, not adding another kick returner, Jermaine Burton's going to have some opportunity here going into training camp to make an impact.